See? You're getting it, I say to my partner with a breathy laugh. In a sense, it was kind of adorable how he tried to match my own movements. It was clear that neither of us were professional dancers, but the way he eventually focused on trying to do it probably made my stomach flutter. The music was incredible. So many couples and groups of people dancing to the upbeat sound. So at odds with the soft music I'd listened to, the sounds of the drums and guitar and violins matching it all too well. I couldn't get enough of it. And with Akaza here with me, I didn't want to leave. Want to try a spin? I asked him over the sound of the music, his hand still on me as he moved throughout the crowd, never staying in one spot. I lifted up my kimono in hopes not to get it dirty on the sandy ground, and Akaza's hands having been rested on my lower back tightened slightly in response to my question. A spin? He asked over the music. I grinned, nodding, like this. I moved my hands from my waist, parting me, already missing the contact of how he spun me alone to the music. Taking his blue-tipped finger in my own human ones, I lifted one of his hands up above my head, his hand still in place when I twirled underneath. I laughed, knowing he probably had no idea what was going on. I then pulled back, strengthening our linked hands before pulling myself back into another style, spinning directly back into his arms. And Akaza caught me, his eyes going a bit wide, but even so, his own smile began to twitch at his pale lips. His golden eyes were alit with an emotion I couldn't place in at the moment, my mind too focused on how amazing it felt to be dancing with such freedom. Could we try that again? He then asked, a bit breathless, despite the fact that he never lost control of his breathing. I agreed, allowing him to take more lead as we danced, feeling the way he spun me upwards and back towards his chest, his smile growing along with his own laughter. See? Are you having fun? I inquired as he twirled me once more, bringing me back towards his vest-covered chest. I suppose, he said, his lips twisting in a way that let me know he was trying to hide a smile. And as the song seemed to never end, our eyes practically never breaking their contact with each other, his label, Golden Eyes, became my focus point, the same way they always had been when we were fighting. It was as almost if Akaza realized that fact, for he kept his gaze fixed on me the entire time the music raged on around us. It could have been hours, minutes, days. I had absolutely no idea how long we spent in each other's grasp, enjoying every moment throughout every song that changed, up until the band who had been playing music stopped, the crowd having disbanded from its large amount of people. I deemed it probably meant the musicians needed a break from all their playing, a break in which they highly deserved for such a heavenly performance. And Akaza and I halted our movements, both of us slightly out of breath as we took in our surroundings, realizing the music had officially stopped. Even so, Akaza kept his arms wrapped tightly around my waist, keeping me pressed against his own body, and my own hands were delicately laid upon his chest. A pang of disappointment coursed through me as the lack of such beautiful sound, though it didn't last very long once I looked back towards the demon who held me. His eyes were scanning my face, his breathing a bit uneven. For a few moments, in that defeating silence that filled the space where the music had once been, it was suddenly just me and him, our breaths mingling as we stayed still in our spots despite all the groups leaving the makeshift dance floor by the fountain. I licked my lips, trying to obtain some moisture back into my mouth from all the heavy intakes of air. Akaza's eyes went directly towards the movement, his golden eyes flickering beneath his hooded stares, pink lashes following in suit. I suppose we should. Akaza looked back up to me, nodding as he then relaxed his grip, loosening until I slipped free. The two of us silently walked away from the fountain, and I allowed myself to take in the difference in our surroundings. It looked as though the population of the festival had diminished almost entirely. Hardly any groups were left. Akaza? I asked the demon beside me. Yes, Yen. Smiling at him, I placed my hands in his once more, the familiar touch grounding me as we began our walk along the main street of the city once more. Thank you for dancing with me. It was generally something I wanted to say to him, to thank him for the feeling he gave me, the feeling of freedom. I couldn't seem to recall the last time I truly felt free. The weight had always been dragging me on. An assassin, one who would never entirely be granted the option of choice. There was always something looming over me, controlling me. But when I danced with Akaza, I'd forgotten all about who I was. I didn't feel like the murderer I had grown forged into. I'd forgotten all about the torturous years of my life. Ultimately, I'd grown to feel as though I truly did belong in a place like this. It felt like I was a normal woman. And even if it was just for one night, it was enough of an experience for me. Of course, I had to thank the one who had allowed me to live such a life, even if that time were to truly be end soon. I'm glad you enjoyed it, Akaza finally said, squeezing my hand, and my heart felt content in that moment as the two of us made our way down the street, watching as the few people who were still shopping at the marketplace stands were still browsing all the things to buy. So many beautiful pieces to buy, food to try and taste. Akaza didn't seem to be paying attention to the shops, almost as though his mind were somewhere else entirely. But my gaze then landed on a familiar tent that had been set up. Not a single person lined up by any means of providing customers to shop owner. It was an older man sitting with his cane in a pleasant silence. I slowed my steps, realizing when I'd seen the shop last time, what he actually sold. Art supplies, all different sorts of it. A memory flashed through my mind, one of my eldest sister tearing up over one of my gifts to her, a painting I'd done of the two of us. That was enough to make my steps halt altogether, forcing Akaza beside me to stop as well. Is everything okay? I heard him say, though it sounded so distant compared to the thoughts that had went through my mind. The elderly man who sat alone made eye contact with me, most likely having felt my stare upon his shop. He smiled gently, and part of me truly wished I could go and look at everything he had to offer. From what I could see, it was full of items I had no idea were even used for art. I'd never been able to have access to supplies I had always wanted to grow up to. Having to deal with the three buckets of primary colors and 2 different size paintbrushes, paper, charcoal, canvases, and colors of paint I didn't even know they made were scattered around him. I wanted to go see. My mind quickly flashed back to the way I'd been feeling tonight. Because maybe tonight I didn't have to be an assassin in hopes of searching for strength. Maybe tonight I could be the person I had always dreamed of being, living the life I'd always wished I'd been granted with. I went to go look, knowing Akaza was going to follow my gaze. He didn't reply right away, but I didn't take my eyes off the tent. You like art? He asked, genuine surprise coating his words. I nodded, smiling a bit, and with that, I let go of his hand, walking over to the shop in a slow pace. I didn't particularly know if Akaza decided to follow me or leave me to go alone, but in that moment, it didn't entirely matter to me, because I knew that he would be there for me either way. Hello, I said to the man softly, bringing my arms to hug myself, suddenly feeling a bit self-conscious. Hello, dear. Is there anything I can help you with today? His voice was so calm, so gentle, though I could still consider his excitement at a new customer. I gave a small smile. Well, my voice trailed off as my gaze staggered onto a set of paints, the variety of colors catching my eye. A painter, I see, the man said, his eyes crackling with a gentle twitch of his lips, amusement evident in his tone. These paints look beautiful, I mumbled, reaching out my hand to look at the varieties of colorful liquid. Indeed they are, one of Japan's most eloquent, crafted by yours truly. My eyes snapped up to his. You made these? He nodded, a soft laugh escaping him. I did, yes. I try to put as much care as I can into what I sell and make. I opened my mouth, lips parting slightly. How much are you selling for these? I decided to ask, a bit scared to hear the price. However, the man only shrugged. I never really decided the price. I suppose I was waiting for someone to be interested in buying them in the first place. I stared at him, not knowing what to say. He had seriously not gotten a single offer on these. I didn't have much money, none that I could spend anyway. In the end, the only money I'd ever spent, aside from necessities, went directly towards aiding my sister. But staring at these stunning sets of colors and canvases before me, I found myself debating it. I wasn't aware you had interest in painting, a voice said from behind me. I turned to see Akaza approaching with a slight raised brow, his voice soft. I smiled at him, turning to face his approaching figure. Well, I used to, that is, before. I trailed off, catching myself before revealing my identity to the craftsman, but Akaza nodded, understanding what I meant. He then paused, walking directly up to the display of art supplies. The old man's posture became a bit straighter, his dark, almond-shaped eyes widened at the sight of Akaza and his powerful form. I almost laughed at the sight, especially with how Akaza then focused intently on the colors before him, his head tilted in the way that made me know he was deep in thought, utterly unaware with how the old man began to reek of fear. I came closer, meeting the man's stare with a shake of my head and a reassuring smile. If you say so, don't worry. He seemed to relax a bit, and Akaza hummed, scanning the options before him, still observing the man's fear. I grabbed his tattoo arm, beginning to look with him. What do you think, I asked him with a grin, amused at how he was analyzing everything and peering up at his focused features. Think about what? He then asked, letting me look without even thinking. I laughed, shaking my head and patting his arm. What do you think I should buy? His pink brows furrowing slightly. It seemed as though Akaza had begun to seriously take it into consideration, with each the best option for me. I like these colors. He pointed his blue finger at a set I would assume would be 20 vials of paint, neatly wrapped in a case. I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. That's quite lovely colors. Should I buy them? Akaza mumbled. Would you need paper as well? The old man then cleared his throat, as if to remind the two of us that he was here as well. We both looked at him and began to speak. If I may, he started, shifting to get up from his chair, wooden cane wobbling in the process. I have a set of canvases I believe you might enjoy. I tilted my head as the craftsman began to shuffle through his things at the back of the tent, Akaza silent beside me. They were one of my first built sets, the man said, bringing over a delicately wrapped set of thin canvases, wooden frames wrapped in cloth. No one has ever had much interest in these, but personally I'm quite proud of them. My brows were raised at the question, my eyes scanning what he held in his hands before a smile appeared on my face. I'll take them, I said confidently, going to reach for the set of brushes and paint Akaza suggested. Speaking of the demon, I felt his head whip towards me at my words. I could practically feel his surprise as I then began to strike as much as I could together, asking the man to grab me some other things from inside the tent as well. Excitement began to grow inside me again at the sight of it all. That's everything for you, dear? The man asked, and I nodded quickly, bringing my hands up to hug myself once more. He then stated the price, and I was surprised at how low it was. Are you sure? I began to ask, frowning as I scanned all the items I wanted to buy. He nodded. I haven't had such a creative mind come to look at my products in a long time as I can remember. It would fill me with immense joy to know that my creations were being used by someone who appreciated it as much as I do. I shook my head, smiling at him. Thank you. I promise to use every bit of it. I then went to reach for whatever money I had left within me, hoping it was enough. However, without me knowing, Akaza had beat me to it. I believe this should cover the cost, he said, handing the man a bag of coins I hadn't even realized he'd been carrying with him. The man's eyes widened once more, taking the bag and feeling how heavy it was. Akaza, he turned to me, smiling. Part of your training, remember? Shaking my head, he didn't allow me to get a chance to speak before he began grabbing all of the supplies I'd bought into his arms. Both me and the craftsman panicked slightly at the roughness he used to carry it, flicking as he shifted everything in his grip. And without another word, he walked back off down the street himself, carrying all the items I'd bought. Well, he'd bought. After thanking the man a million times over, I ran after the demon, trying not to trip over my kimono. Thanks for waiting, asshole, I breathed, finally catching up to his side. Akaza peered at me with a single raised brow, holding on to my supplies as though it was nothing. I was expecting a thank you, considering I bought this for you. I narrowed my eyes, trying to hide my growing smile. I'll consider thanking you, I teased. He scoffed silence, then following amongst us for a few more moments before Akaza spoke up once more. Is there anything else you would like to do tonight, Yen? As we exited the main road of the city, leaving the festival that had brought so much joy into my life, I thought about Akaza's question, looking back at the place and replying all that had happened in the only few hours in my mind, the few hours that felt the world to me as now. A part of me, a big part of me, that is, didn't want such a wonderful experience to end, but then again, I wasn't even sure what else there was to do. I did think about going straight back to the townhouse and diving straight into my new art supplies. However, if I were to do that now, a big part of what was important to me tonight would be missing. I wanted to spend more time with the demon who was responsible for such a feeling, for making me feel free, even if it was just for one night. After a few moments of developing into a deep thought, I finally replied, "Let's drop this stuff off of the house first," I decided. "We have a few hours until daybreak anyways." Akaza nodded. "All right, let's head that way then." Gesturing with a jerk of his head, we changed paths, heading back to the tiny home. "A walk?" Akaza asked, placing down the art supplies into my bedroom floor in surprisingly gentleness. I reached down to help, but he only shooed me off with a wave of his hand, the two of us standing once more. "Yeah," I said sheepishly. "I thought we could maybe go for a walk by the river before sunrise." He tilted his head, pink hair shifting with a movement. The sight made me smile for some reason. "I wouldn't mind a walk." My smile grew into a full-on grin as I grabbed onto his hand, half pulling the demon downstairs and out of the house once more. "Is there a specific reason you want to go to the river?" he asked once more as we were out the door and out into the chilly night. Thankfully, the kimono was still itching my skin and was quite warm. I shrugged, not entirely wanting my voice to reason. In all honesty, I wasn't completely sure why I wanted to go either. The thought had crossed my mind, somehow knowing it would finish off the night in a perfect way. It would be nice to visit it and, appreciate it once more, since we never get the chance to focus on it while we train. Akaza didn't respond, but I felt his gaze sit on my form as we walked, hand in hand like we always were. Practically no one else was out there, considering the fact that the festival was now pretty much over. I also began to recall how tonight was supposedly the last night it would be taking place. Part of me was saddened at the thought. Once we were near the woods we trained near, I could already hear the raging current of the river, allowing me to know we were getting closer. "How long have you been interested in painting?" the demon asked suddenly, causing me to give him a side-eyed glance. "Well, for a long while, actually. As long as I can remember. Growing up, it was always what I loved to do most. That is, before my mother dragged me into this position." Akaza nodded thoroughly. "And you stopped after that?" I shrugged slightly. It wasn't entirely my choice, but I guess you could say so. I didn't simply have the time. I smiled before continuing. "Even so, I always made time to draw and paint for my sister, even losing sleep over it." I see." I hummed to myself, smiling at my own thoughts as I spoke out loud. "She would have loved all this," I said, gesturing to our surroundings. "Kiyomi, you'd never met someone so gentle and kind. She would never dream of hurting anyone." "I suppose that was why you took that burden yourself?" Nodding, I closed my eyes. I wish she could have been here tonight. I miss her so much. I opened my eyes once more, greeting them with the icy wind. But if she had been here, I think that I would have only felt worse. Seeing her, it always reminded me of my goal, the pain and suffering she endured, and why I do everything I can to help her. Akaza didn't say anything as we continued down the rocky path, the river sounding louder with each step. "The world simply doesn't deserve someone as lovely as her," I said, my voice growing quieter. "To be honest, she should be free of her endless pain." I swallowed before speaking the next part. "But I'm selfish. I'm so terribly selfish that I keep tethering her to such a hateful word. The full place of killers and manipulators. I'm one of those people. I wasn't born special by the way Kiyomi was. And I suppose that's why I do everything I can to help her, from my own selfish desire of keeping her around." I stopped walking, Akaza pushing Akaza pausing beside me. Without saying another word, he finally at a regular training spot alongside the river as I stared at the rushing water, pushing back some of the hair that had gotten into my face. Maybe I didn't deserve to feel such happiness, I whispered, feeling a heavy hang over my shoulder like a barrier that I could just never seem to get rid of, even when I started to believe I am close to being free of it, the guilt. Silence settled over us for a moment, a few moments where my thoughts began to grow even more conflicting inside my mind, of how grateful I was that I was able to experience such a joyous night, and the other part was telling me that I didn't deserve it in the first place. Akaza stared at Yin, his heartbeat turning dangerously slow and loud inside his chest, his head a rhythmic drum that began to decrease in tempo. He'd forgotten all about the river at the sound. The look on the young assassin's face. He had only seen it in one time before, a time that felt so long ago from now, a time where she had screamed at him, the truth of her hard-working spilling before her, as though she was pouring her emotions out of a teapot, her grip on it uncontrolling. It was so strange, seeing her sad instead of angry, seeing sorrow instead of rage she'd grown so used to. It became even harder to look at when only a few hours ago she had been full of light in which he hadn't seen in a single human ever before. Some part of him generally couldn't stand the sight of it, of her losing possession of her lifeless eyes. Yin, he said, trying to sound a bit stern by means of snapping her out of it. She looked at him now, slowly. A shot of pain rang through his chest as she did so. Akaza chose to ignore it. I have brought you here tonight because you deserve it. She only watched him. Akaza took a step closer. In fact, I believe you deserve so much more than a single night of happiness. You deserve all the days you want to paint, to dance, to cook. He wasn't really sure what he was saying at this point, but he knew it was the truth that he spoke. The demon took the young assassin's hand in his blue-tipped ones, lips twitching with a smile. I choose you, remember? I choose you. And I know I haven't met your sister, but personally, I believe you deserve happiness more than anyone else does. Her lips parted when she stared at him. Akaza? He grinned. I haven't told you this in a while, but I'm extremely proud of you. Not just for the physical strength you've gained, but for the way you've grown even tonight. I can't say that many humans have that sort of strength. Hardly any at all, in fact. He could hear her heartbeat raging, and his own began to sink with it as he stared into her eyes. Such familiar eyes, a sight he grew to look forward to seeing every single night, to see her power rage within them. He always thought she was beautiful when she looked like that. Now as well, she looked quite lovely in the low dim, the silver gleam of the moon along, acting like a sheen around her itself. You are special. For a human. I hope you can remember that. Akaza then finished, hoping that the truth was enough to make her feel better, hoping to see that life enter back into her eyes. But it wasn't necessary that the light had entered back into her gaze. He couldn't exactly tell what emotion it was, but something about it was unfamiliar, something he didn't think he'd seen from her before. However it was, though, it made his body completely go still. You are special for a demon, Akaza. She then whispered, for her own smile growing. You've done quite a lot for me, and I owe you so much thanks. Yin took a step closer, and Akaza straightened his frozen position, looking down at her with eyes slightly wide. The look in her eyes was driving him crazy. He couldn't discern what it meant, but it made his insides feel as though they were on fire, becoming so much more aware of every part of his body the closer she moved. And then she closed the distance between them, throwing her arms around his neck and squeezing whilst holding onto him. A hug. She was giving him a hug, he thought, though he didn't know if that was particularly true. Akaza felt his eyes grow slightly wider, felt her body pressing up right against his. Of course they'd trained and been in such familiar positions before, but something about this time was extremely different. Her face went to rest against his chest, heart pounding beneath the surface. Was this fear? Thank you for everything, Akaza. She mumbled against his vest, hands interlocking behind his neck. Slowly, Oh, so slowly, the demon reached his own hands to wrap around her torso. Haven't they been this close whilst dancing? So why is this? He found himself wanting her closer, wanting her breath in the familiar scent. He didn't know what was happening to him. All he knew is in that moment was her, the assassin who had reminded him what it truly meant to care. He pulled away, suddenly needing to see her face. So delicate for a killer, so strong for a woman, so powerful. His thoughts roared as they stayed still, her eyes peering up at him from under her lashes, her gaze wavering over his features. Akaza was struck frozen, his own gaze going straight for any movement she made. The twitches of her lips, the shift of her eyes, it was alluring to him. They were so close. Why did he want to get closer? However, Akaza wasn't able to answer that thought, for he only allowed himself to inhale. A scent filled in his mind his senses. It was not the woman in front of him. That was all it took for him to know. Akaza backed away, eyes scanning the trees and river before them. What's wrong? She began, only to cut herself off, as she then most likely sensed what he had mere seconds ago. She froze as well, making eye contact with him. Someone else is here. Both of their eyes red. Yin nodded, and Akaza then dared to take a step closer to whisper to her. Whoever this is, they are not human. He breathed so quietly that even the assassin could hardly hear. I'm going to need you to return to the house. Her eyes wide, a sound breaking through the forest. Yin, I know you are strong. I know you can handle yourself. I know, he said through teeth, but I know the scent. I know who is here. She then began to breathe heavily. And I need you to run, or you won't die. Do you understand? It took a second for her to nod. Go, please, he said, unsure of why he became so desperate for her to leave the area. I'll meet you back at the house. Okay, she breathed in response, and with a speed that even was so quick for Akaza to detect, she was off, making way for the townhouse. The demon then waited until she was far away, enough that her scent had disappeared from his senses, and then he turned to the forest, the demon still lingering in the area. Akaza sneered, waiting and watching. It's been a while, Akaza, a velvety voice sounded. I'm so glad you gave us time to chat alone. I didn't expect to see you here, Doma.